treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome. Thank you for joining me today for this very special edition of our Scratching the Surface feature. I thought we'd do something a little different today where instead of me watching the movie and providing my commentary of shitty little comments, I would actually record a commentary where I essentially do the same thing. The added benefit of that for me is that normally when I write one of these Scratching the Surface posts, I am constantly stopping and starting the movie to make my comments, and it takes me, upwards of 4 hours depending on the length of the movie. I think when I did the second Transformers movie, it seemed like ages that it took, and I think it has an impact on my viewing experience because eventually it seems inevitable that I just want the movie to be over. So I'm going to try it this way today, and if you want to listen along with me as we watch Breaking Dawn Part 1 together, you are more than welcome to do so. So I have my DVD queued up, and I just need to find it here. There we go. So I'm going to allow you to sync up. I'm gonna tell you the moment that the Summit Entertainment logo leaves the screen, and that should allow you. I mean, it's not 100% necessary that you be 100% synced up, but it probably is useful when I'm talking about stuff going on the screen. So I'm going to count to 3. On the count of 3, the Summit Entertainment logo will have just left the screen. Okay? So 1, 2, 3. There we go. So let's talk a little bit about how this movie came to be. It's a little interesting. The first 3 movies were made, and they were, greenlit in quick succession. And this one, Summit actually hesitated quite a bit, and they didn't greenlight it right away, and there was a lot of consternation about how to adapt it. And I think the reason for that is that it's completely batshit insane. And one of the big decision that they made is that they wanted a really good filmmaker to take on this book, the 4th book of Stephenie Meyer's novels made into 2 films. And there was, a lot of speculation and a lot of names thrown around about who would actually end up directing it. And I think a couple of the names that were thrown out there were Gus Van Sant, and I think another one was Sofia Coppola. And I don't know how serious they were about actually getting those kinds of people to direct the movie, but the person that they ultimately ended up hiring was Bill Condon. Bill Condon is actually a very interesting person to take on the franchise. He is very well respected, and he had won an Oscar for writing the screenplay for a movie called Gods and Monsters, which he also directed. Gods and Monsters was a movie about James Whale at the end of his life, a gay man who was slowly losing his mind. It starred Ian McKellen and Brendan Fraser, and if you haven't seen it, it's really, really good, and you should see it. And so he was brought in to direct. He agreed, but he did not. Interestingly, even though he won a screenwriting Oscar, he did not write the scripts for either film. That task went to Melissa Rosenberg, who had written the scripts for the previous 3 movies. But it's not hard to imagine that he did have some input into the scripts. But again, it's interesting because how invested was Bill Condon in making of these movies. the good thing is that he himself has recorded commentaries for both installments now that they're both on DVD and you can listen to him, and it's interesting. I assumed it was kind of a paycheck gig for him, and I assume he'll also get to whatever passion project he has that he hasn't been able to get fundraising for, he'll be able to now get fundraising for as part of, payback for, being part of the Twilight franchise. Which is basically what happened with Chris Weitz, who was the director of New Moon. He, when he directed that movie, he was in a bit of trouble because he had directed The Golden Compass, which was a fairly expensive. I don't think they lost a ton of money because it actually did well overseas, but it was seen as a big disappointment and basically a flop, and he was in director jail at the time. And so they brought him in to direct that movie, and then he was allowed to make a movie called A Better Life about an illegal immigrant, I believe in Los Angeles, who gets into a fair bit of trouble when his truck is stolen. And that film received quite a bit of acclaim, and the lead actor was nominated for an Oscar. So I imagine Bill Condon will get to do the same thing. He'll get to make a personal project bankrolled by Summit at some point. So we'll see if that actually happens. So let's talk a little bit about the scene going on right now. So, yeah, in the third film, we got the backstories of pretty much every single minor supporting character in the Cullen family. And here we get a bit of more backstory on Edward and how he used to kill people. He confesses to Bella that he was basically Vampire Dexter. And you can see here that Bride of Frankenstein being homaged. Clearly Bill Condon's influence being felt since he's a huge fan of Bride of Frankenstein. You would think, being a vampire, that they'd be watching, Bela Lugosi's Dracula. But I guess, at least it has a bride in it, so I guess it works thematically. But, this is the moment that Edward chooses to tell Bella that he used to murder people the night before they're ready to get married. It's very interesting timing. You think this would have come up sooner. And the weird thing about this is that Bella barely, look at this, she barely reacts. I mean, she's constantly making excuses for him. It gets back into that kind of icky subtext that I've written about in the previous entries, where you have this man who is, by his very nature, sort of, if not evil, sort of prone to violence, wants to abuse and murder, and you have the woman who basically makes excuses for him. It's a bit icky, if you ask me. But, we could go into a lot of the ugly subtext of the Twilight franchise, and as much as I do want to talk about it, I don't want to dwell on it too much for this one. Kristen Stewart, she still seems like a stammering, stuttering, twitchy presence in this film. It's not really until the last film that starts to change a bit after she's been transformed into a vampire. Kellen Lutz, who I don't think has been in any major movies before this, and I can't imagine will be in any major movies after this. And I want to say the same for Jackson Rathbone. Jackson Rathbone actually was in M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender, and he played a major role in that movie. M. Night Shyamalan can turn good actors into bad actors, so if you've seen that movie, you know what he did with Jackson Rathbone. So the funny thing about this movie is that a lot of the misogyny and kind of troubling subtext is present later on, but for this first section where it's the wedding and the preparation for the wedding and the initial stages of the honeymoon, it's not so bad. Here we have an example with Bella crawling into bed next to her stupid dog face painting, which, again, a weird detail, but this shot goes on forever, and one has to wonder if that's because of the decision to split the story into 2 movies that you get some of this padding. Now, this sequence is very interesting because, you can kind of feel Bill Condon. He's a respected director and screenwriter, and wrote the screenplay for Chicago. Was kind of the mastermind of how to make that movie. He made Dreamgirls. He's made a couple other movies, but he actually got his start out in horror. I think his first director gig was the sequel to Candyman. And here we have the great Michael Sheen, who gets a much bigger role in part 2, and who's really great. But they kind of plays up some of the horror aspects a little bit, via this dream sequence with Bella imagining herself as a vampire on her wedding day, having massacred all her guests. So this stuff is fun. And poor Anna Kendrick, how long does she have to lay there on top of the pile? Here's Ashley Greene as Alice telling Bella that she looks like ass. The whole thing about a vampire wedding, you would think it would be a little bit more macabre, but this whole sequence feels like something out of a TLC reality show. So these characters don't register as vampires to me. Here we get a little bit of the humor. There's a little bit more humor in these two installments, and especially for the last one, where it becomes at times just a full-on comedy. I think that's one of the things that Condon actually brought that I appreciate, because I think he probably would never admit it in his commentary, but I do think he thinks his story is ridiculous and tedious, and he has to do some things to make it interesting for him. So it's funny in Bride of Frankenstein, the James Whale character, he says about Bride of Frankenstein, in Gods and Monsters, the James Whale character says he had to make Bride of Frankenstein interesting for himself, so he inserted a lot of comedy. And I'm sure that Bill Condon was remembering that line and remembering that impulse as he was making these movies, that he was basically finding ways to make them interesting for himself, which was to add a lot of humor. And so there's a lot more intentional humor in these 2 installments than there has been in any of the other movies. Yeah. Again, they just don't really register as vampires, do they? I mean, Stephenie Meyer, who wrote the books, I don't think has a great interest in vampire fiction, and wasn't really aware of any of the standard tropes or the legacy of vampires. She basically wanted to make a story about abstinence, which is fine. I think vampires have been used as abstinence metaphors before. Obvious metaphor of the danger of penetration. In this case, a vampire sinking his teeth into your neck. Eventually she lost track of that metaphor when they actually have to have sex, in which case the metaphor for sex is sex, and it's kind of out the window at that point. But, So here's Kristen Stewart looking very constipated. And again, another really long shot of just her. And it's hard not to feel like this isn't being padded out a bit. Billy Burke, the incomparable Billy Burke. I think he's far and away certainly the best actor to appear in all 5 movies. So, and he's, the universe has rewarded him. think he now has a hit TV show on NBC called Revolution, which I have not seen, but and he doesn't have to have the stupid mustache. But I would maybe I'll have to check it out someday. I'm sure it's a good show, or at least I'm sure he's good in it at the very least. It's funny, when this movie came out, I think there was quite a bit of suspense about what Bella's wedding dress would look like. And so this whole sequence here where it's slowly revealed in pieces is kind of the payoff to that. I can't imagine being excited to find out what Bella's wedding dress looks like, but, that's why I fully admit that I don't understand women at all. And which is part of why I kind of like watching these Twilight. I don't, a lot of people have asked me why I spend so much time and energy thinking about the Twilight series, and the truth is I really don't get it, and I want to. And the explanations I've come up with for their popularity are kind of ugly, and I'd like to think better of people, and certainly better of women. So I think there must be some. Even now, I've, in my original Twilight post, I put forward my ugly theories about why women might be drawn to Bella Swan and view her courtship with a vampire as fantasy. And again, I don't think, if I'm right, it speaks very well of the people who like these movies and these books. So I'm happy to be proven wrong. This wedding takes a really long time. Just the ceremony itself takes quite a while. It's very beautifully shot. You can see here what Bill Condon's doing. So we're in broad daylight. I know they got the tree, flowers hanging down, but we're in broad daylight here. And there's no sparkling. None of the guests are sparkling. Edward is not sparkling. I think he made a pretty clear decision to forego that. I mean, obviously you couldn't have it here, and the logical thing to do would have, of course, been to have the wedding inside, where there would be no chance of sparkling. But by placing the wedding outdoors and not having them sparkling, Condon is kind of saying, to hell with all that. He's kind of recognizing that it's stupid, and he's going to have no part of it, which, bravo to him for that, because it is a very silly idea that although when Bella becomes a vampire in the 5th movie, she will sparkle for a moment, but he pulls the camera way the hell back, because you can tell he just doesn't like it, which nor should he. It's a dumb idea. I think this is the same song that played during the prom sequence in the first movie. So this is the callback to that. I guess women like that kind of, or fans. I shouldn't just say women. I'm sure there are men who like Twilight. And they appreciate those kind of things. Again, it's odd, right? That no one thinks it's weird that two 18-year-olds are in such a rush to get married. And why are they in a rush? I don't think it's ever properly addressed why they're in such a... Other than the fact that Bella just doesn't want to be older than Edward, which makes her seem incredibly vain. But, So here we get into, more of the humor I was talking about. Some of it is quite nice. So some of it's a bit meta, commenting on the extravagance of the wedding, but it's it's something I certainly appreciate it. And I think this actor's name is Gil Birmingham. He's quite good, actually. I like almost all the adults in the Twilight series, with the exception of Peter Facinelli, who plays Carlisle, who I don't think is very good. I think he just kind of mumbles all his dialogue, and that's pretty much it. It's hard not to laugh when you see characters like this. Here we have Maggie Grace from Lost. She's playing Irina, who exists entirely to create the plot of the second movie, which is just a silly misunderstanding that should really be resolved in 2 lines of dialogue, but instead takes up 60 minutes of screen time. But we can talk about that more when we get to that movie. If anyone actually listens to this and doesn't turn it off in 5 minutes, maybe we can talk about the second movie in another commentary. That would be. Maggie Grace is not a bad actress, but she's in this movie for 30 seconds, so she doesn't embarrass herself. I can always hear Robert Pattinson struggling with his American accent. I know some people tell me I'm crazy, but I hear it. I think Kellen Lutz actually doesn't do bad here. I mean, it's not a great joke, but Billy Burke's reaction to it is killer. Anna Kendrick wondering why she's still in these movies. I imagine right around the time she was nominated for an Oscar for Up in the Air, she began to really regret signing on for the Twilight franchise. But at least I imagine she came in and did it very quickly. I've never been to a wedding where it was open mic and everyone just got to make a toast. It's usually the best man and the maid of honor, and that's it. But I think this is a way to cram some more humor into the movie. But it's not all that successful, if you ask me. This is Billy Burke's reaction to this is funny as well. I think all of Billy Burke's reactions are funny. On what basis do they say Bella Swan is wonderful? I don't. I wonder where all the guests came from. I take it that Bella's father Charlie has lived in Forks, his entire life. But so he could have found a few people to invite, but I don't think Bella knows anybody in Forks other than her few high school friends and the Cullens. So I just wonder who all these people are. How many of them are, since they're not sparkling, and it's hard to tell how many are vampires and how many aren't. Oh boy. So, nothing like a Hallmark card sentiment for your bride on your wedding day. It's funny there, they showed the vampires holding champagne, but they don't drink it, right? I mean, so, it must be awkward for them. Again, one has to imagine that if they could have filmed the final book in one movie, this sequence would have been chopped way the hell down. Because it is starting, even at this point, we're getting to an important moment, I guess, but it's been dragging, I think. I don't think anyone would argue otherwise. Now, the funny thing here about Taylor Lautner in this movie, and in the final movie, is that he only takes his shirt off in one scene each movie. In this one, it was in the opening scene when he got upset about Bella. He took off his shirt and phased into a werewolf and ran off. And in the second movie, it's another phasing. Apparently, he's really worried about messing up his clothes when he turns into into a werewolf in these movies. Whereas before, he was just tearing through the jeans. But in the second movie, it's a very funny moment where he strips in front of Charlie to turn into a wolf. Spoiler. But yeah, but basically my point is he keeps his shirt on, which is interesting that he decides to. I think, because I've listened to the commentary, Bill Condon's commentary on both movies, that the desire to keep his shirt on actually came from Taylor Lautner. I think people were starting to make fun of him after Eclipse came out, and he basically was bare-chested in almost every single scene, and it got to be a bit pornographic, and he wants to be, I think he wants to be taken a little bit more seriously. Unfortunately, I don't think Taylor Lautner is going to have... I think there was a time when people thought he might have a career after these movies, and I'm sure he'll show up in a few things here or there. But I think his first attempt at that was a movie called Abducted, and that was a huge bomb, both with critics and at the box office, so it looks very doubtful for him at the moment. I don't think he's necessarily the worst actor. I think he's not well served by this material, obviously. I think a lot of it is angsty and mopey. I think he did well when he didn't have to do that kind of stuff basically for the first movie and a half. In the first movie, you'd never guess Jacob is going to become such an important character. And in the second movie, he seems kind of... obviously, he's being set up there as the love triangle. That movie is all about the love triangle. And for the first half of it, he gets to smile and court Bella, and basically once she rejects him at the movies, he turns into a mopey, pissy teenager, and his performance is pretty much downhill from there. And I don't think he ever recovers. And certainly in this scene, he's not well served by the writing. So here he learns that Bella's not going to be turned into a vampire during her honeymoon, so he interprets it that they're not going to get it on, and then he learns that they are. You are joking, right? So apparently vampires are voracious in the sack, apparently. The idea of a vampire having sex is fairly absurd, and there's a lot of absurdities in this story. And vampires having sex is the least of it. But yeah. So where did these guys come from? How are they suddenly there? I don't know. So, yeah. Unfortunately, the triangle aspects of the relationship, go on for a good portion of this movie, longer than you'd think. You'd think by the time they're married, Jacob would be over it, but apparently not. And again, I hate to harp on this again, but you really got to get the sense that this sequence takes forever because they just don't have enough story. So we get all these long goodbyes. I mean, this is like the ending of Hook with all the goodbyes. And I got to point out the complete lack of any sort of sense with this trip that they're about to take. So right now we're in Forks, Washington. It's very late at night. They are going to head to the airport where they're going to hop on a plane, and I believe they're going to fly to Rio de Janeiro, which is quite a journey from Forks, Washington. I think it would be a good 12-hour flight or so. Maybe a little less, or maybe a little more, depending on conditions. But it's a long flight, I guess is my point. And the time difference between Forks, Washington, and Rio de Janeiro is not too great. I think it'd be a couple hours. You're going mostly south, so it's not like you're flying to Asia where you gain time or anything. So it's late at night. They're going to the airport, flying down to Brazil. Then they're going to go out at night. So they land at night, I guess is my point, in Brazil. They go out on the town, hang out for a little bit. Then they get in a boat, and then they drive, or, they take the boat to their private island. They get to the island. Bella takes an inordinately long amount of time to get ready so they can go swimming in the moonlight. And they swim in the moonlight, and it's still night. And they do that for a bit, and then they go and have sex. And they have sex, and it is still night. So my point is that this is apparently the sun has died out, because this is the longest night in the history of the world. Unless a day passed during their trip to Rio de Janeiro, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it's maybe not one of those things you think about too much. But being the world traveler that I am, it's one of those things that occurred to me, and I think it always makes me laugh every time I watch this movie. But whatever, I guess it's a storytelling license. I mean, it feels okay as you're watching it. It's only, once you start to think about it, it seems very ridiculous. But a lot of things feel very ridiculous when you think about them too much in these movies. So you're better off not thinking. All right. And so they're off. So I wonder, is that wolf cry supposed to be Jacob, or is it just supposed to remind her of Jacob? I'm not sure. But she doesn't seem very happy, does she? Of course, she never seems very happy. Oh, we're in Rio. I think the only time she ever seems genuinely happy in these movies is after she's been turned into a vampire, which may beg the question, is that all she ever really wanted in the first place was to become... Would she be so into Edward if he were not a vampire? I think the answer is no. But again, it's still night. They got to Rio. I've never been to Brazil. Although I will say from... I know plenty of people who have gone to Rio de Janeiro. And if you do decide to go there, all I can tell you is be careful. I'm sure it's a great place to visit, but it can be a little dangerous. But that's everywhere. You can find dangerous spots anywhere in the globe. And they actually filmed this in Rio de Janeiro, actually, which is cool. I mean, the funny thing about these movies is that they slowly became more and more expensive as they went along. Not that these were, compared to how much money they make at the box office, they're still relatively low budget affairs, but they did get more and more money. The first one was made very cheaply, and it looks every bit as cheap as it was. I mean, it's got kind of a scrappy indie feel to it, which I kind of like, but it's also, the least visually appealing of the movies. It's kind of gray and colorless, which I think was an intentional choice. It doesn't cost a ton of money to make a movie look good, but in the second movie, the third movie, obviously there's a lot more special effects. The cinematography is greatly improved, and there's just more production value, and of course, part of that production value is a hell of a lot of helicopter shots. Not a lot of helicopter. There's a few in this movie. I guess I should start pointing them out like I do in the other posts, but there's not quite as many helicopter shots in this movie. Again, this is all this private island, all part of the fantasy, I think, for young women. I mean, who wouldn't want to be swept away to a private island in Brazil? It looks awesome. Look at that bed. My God. It's funny, later they're revealed to have a maid who comes and cleans. And I wonder, does she live somewhere else on the island, or does she actually take a boat in? I don't think it's explained. Questions that need answering. So now we're about to have another sequence where we get a pop song played. And so the thing to know about the Twilight movies is I think that the soundtracks probably make more money than the movies themselves. So there's a requirement that each soundtrack have a certain number of songs featured prominently within the film. And so, you have to come up with excuses to have a pop song played. And obviously, anytime you can get a montage sequence into a movie, you can play a song over it. So in this case, in some of the other movies, it was like a fight training montages or killer for those purposes. In this movie, it's more. I think this one is getting ready to bone. So again, it's more padding, but it's serving two functions at this point. It's padding out the film's running time, and it's creating an excuse for a pop song. None of these songs are very good. At least not in my opinion. I think all the Twilight films, they've either been indie songs that get discovered that they can acquire the rights to cheaply, and the artists are happy for the exposure, or they're songs that are written specifically for the films. In this one, I think the wedding song and the song that they're going to play during the lovemaking montage was one that was written for the film, and you can kind of tell it's not a terrible song, but it's pretty banal in its lyrics. I think it's called Turning Page. My favorite of the Twilight pop songs, I think, is in the second movie, which it only appears in the credits, and it's called White Demon Love Song by the Killers, and it's a very silly song. I mean, it feels silly to me. I laugh every time I hear it, but I kind of like the song. I think if you divorce it from its Twilight roots, it's actually not a bad song. I kind of hope when they make the 50 Shades of Grey movie, they can somehow incorporate that song, which, I mean, it's in a Twilight movie, but it's not really heavily featured. It's only over the end credits, so they should include it in the 50 Shades of Grey movie, if you ask me. It would be appropriate, since those books are rip-offs of Twilight and started as fan fiction of Twilight. So that water must be cold as hell. I don't care how hot it was during the day. If you've ever gone swimming at night, there's some serious vampire shrinkage going on right now. But again, you can see this is, very beautifully shot. There's no denying it. Unfortunately, the relationship between Bella and Edward is based on nothing more than a desire to bone. Neither one has any interests, anything interesting, no goals, no ambitions, no passions, divorced from each other. They live for each other. There's nothing else going on in their lives. Every source of conflict in their lives is an external force that results from their relationship. It's usually either werewolves or other vampires trying to kill them. One wonders what their happily ever after will be like when there's no more external threats, and I wonder if they'll start to get bored with each other, since they have nothing else going on in their lives. But, of course, in any romance, once the couples are happily ever after, it's over, the movie's over. You don't have to worry about what comes after that. So here's this idea that vampires are super strong and he can't control himself when they're boning. It's kind of icky, if you ask me. I remember, so I drug a group of my friends to see this movie at midnight on opening day, because I wanted to see it with the most excited, most enthusiastic crowd, because I was so fascinated by the women who are so excited about these movies. And I remember when this moment faded to black, there was groaning, simply because that was all. I mean, there was such disappointment that after all that hype about a sex scene, that was it. And of course, we're about to get more. And Condon does this weird thing where he flashes back. You know, she had the morning after, and she thinks back to their night. And again, it's this, more padding, it feels like, doesn't it? But this song is not bad. I mean, it's very banal in its lyrics. But, you know, lyrics are the least important part of a song, if you ask me. It's not a great sex scene. The sex scene in the next movie is both shorter and more entertaining because I guess at that point they're both vampires, so they can really go at it, and it's kind of it's like a Looney Tunes version of a sex scene, and I enjoy it. I mean, the thing about the Twilight movies is that you have to find little things to enjoy, and certainly there's more to enjoy in these two installments because, like I said, Summit was really hesitant to make it. I mean, they were always going to make it into a movie, or two movies in this case. It was just a question of how to do it because the story that Stephenie Meyer came up with is really crazy. If you think about everything that happens, you have a vampire wedding, a vampire sex that leads to a vampire baby, or a half vampire, half human baby. That the half vampire fetus breaks the spine of its mother. There's a birth scene where the father performs a cesarean section with his teeth. And then, once we have a vampire baby born, a werewolf who had a crush on its mother imprints and falls in love with it immediately. I mean, that is... And that doesn't even touch on some of the other crazy stuff that happens, but that's most of the craziness. And it's completely insane. And when they adapted the books, they have all those beats in the movies, and yet they kind of find a way to make it not as crazy as it sounds when you're describing it that way. Which is, again, probably too bad. I mean, there's obviously a version of this movie, of this story that takes place in one movie, so he doesn't have all this padding, but also just amps up the craziness. And unfortunately, we'll never see that version, but I think Bill Condon does find little ways to make it entertaining, as much as anyone could, I guess. So now we are about to enter into another sequence, which is more like the tedious padding I was talking about already. So, Edward recognizes that he's hurt Bella during their lovemaking, and so now he's gonna refuse. So, they have a real problem where he can't touch her. And, yes. I mean, she can't, I guess, it's a story problem that she can't get pregnant immediately. There has to be something happening. But unfortunately, none of this is Bella's attempts to seduce her husband are not terribly interesting. I guess Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson were a real couple at this time, and I guess she hadn't cheated on him yet. I don't know. It's not that I care about such things, but certainly if they have any chemistry in real life, it does not translate onto screen. So I know I feel like I'm a little bit of a jerk, to these actors. But, what do they care what I say about them? Obviously, they have more money than I'll ever will, and relative amount of success, and they don't care what I think. So, I don't feel bad. I gotta say, there are much more fun things to do in Brazil uh, than sitting around playing chess or wandering around the forest, for that matter. It's funny, I think, they obviously had this very elaborate honeymoon, but they didn't really plan anything to do, except, I guess, just lays around on their private island, which again just kind of goes back to the fact that they don't really have any interests outside of each other. It's not a very healthy relationship, if you ask me. Bella having her dream here. It's an interesting thing they show him in bed with her, although it's been established that vampires do not sleep. One wonders what he does while she sleeps all night. Does he just lay there motionless? He must be bored as hell. One hopes he at least has a good book to read or something. I think in the next movie they actually show Jackson Rathbone reading the biography of Keith Richards, which is hilarious. So I don't know. We never find out what Edward's reading habits are. And here you just have a woman begging for her husband to, make love to her. I mean, and basically abuse her. Although, and it's just kind of icky. Not that sex is icky, but just the fact that, this underlying idea that he has to hurt her in order to, for them to make love is just kind of gross. And he's supposed to be ice cold, right? It's just... Uh-oh. Wait, this isn't Snow White, is it? Did we switch to Snow White? Oh, no, this is... Oh, okay. Poor... So the actor playing Seth here, who's the guy sitting bare-chested next to... So Taylor Lautner wasn't going to take his shirt off, so somebody had to fill in. So now that's why we get Seth here, bare-chested. He's played by Boo Boo Stewart, who was in the third movie, and he was younger then, and he had a few lines, and he wasn't bad. And just like Taylor Lautner in this one, he's kind of asked to pout, and he's not nearly as appealing a presence when he's asked to pout. Well, who is, I mean, to be honest. So, not a great actor. But again, I don't really like picking on these guys. Obviously, when you're casting a movie and you need Native American actors, your pool of talent is much smaller because there's just not as many Native American actors. And so you kind of have to take what you can get. And I mean, none of these guys are all that great, but, it's not offensively bad, I guess. This idea of imprinting is, I want to say interesting, but it's really quite disturbing. It's the idea that your mate has no choice. You basically imprint on them. It's more this meant to be, love at first sight stuff. Helicopter shot. Okay, there are some helicopter shots. But it's, obviously is taken to a very disturbing extreme at the end of this movie. And again, just icky. We'll talk about it some more later on. So do they live on this island, or do they come in on their own boat? I don't know. But I actually, again, with respect to the adult actors, the woman playing the maid, I wish I knew her name, she's quite good. I'd certainly watch her in another movie. Although it would probably be in Portuguese. So again, if you've seen the fifth movie, you know that this is kind of a setup for something that occurs in the fifth movie with some of these Brazilians have legends and they know about these demons that drink people's blood. And that becomes slightly important for about 30 seconds in the fifth movie. So, thank God they set it up here. So I guess this is what Edward does. He just kind of stands around while Bella sleeps. It's going to be quite a... Well, I guess it won't be an issue after they're both vampires. So now we're finally, we're at what? 48 minutes into this movie? And we're about 48 minutes in, and we're finally getting to the major story development, which is Bella's pregnancy. So they set it up really subtly here with her eating everything in the fridge, which is what pregnant people do. So she's going to eat yogurt and peanut butter and fried or grilled chicken, which is all you need to know that she is preggers. Oh, what's that? Oh. That doesn't look very good, does it? Ooh. How many mornings of my life have I spent doing that? Different reasons. Alright, here I come. So Bella's going to finally realize that she hasn't had her period in 2 weeks after she was supposed to have it. I don't know if it normally takes women that long to figure that out, but, you know, Bella's not the brightest bulb in the outlet, so what can you do? So, we get into this next aspect of the story, and again, Edward is going to react like every shitty guy who ever found out his girlfriend got knocked up, which is to get really angry at the woman for getting pregnant and then demand that she have an abortion. And this is supposed to be the guy. I mean, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, I don't care. It's just the initial reaction is so ugly. It's just, and this is supposed to be our, you know, our protagonist, and I don't know that this movie necessarily has anything it wants to say about a pro-life, pro-choice debate. I don't think really the series has that high-mindedness about it. I think if anything, Stephenie Meyer wanted to have a newlywed couple basically run through all the narrative beats you might expect, and then she had to account for the fact that they were happening to a vampire couple. And I think that's all there is to it. Alice's powers work really quick. So she called Bella almost immediately. So she has the best powers of all the vampires, I think. It's interesting. In this movie, and especially the next movie, obviously, where they meet more vampires with powers, they really are not vampires anymore. They're really just X-Men. So again, the idea that a vampire could impregnate a human woman is thoroughly absurd. More Benny Hill style movements for vampires. This honeymoon is over. Okay. So do we need some more padding? Yes, we do. Do we need another pop song? Yes, we do. So here you go, folks. This shot, this little thing here where Bella just kind of stands around takes forever. See what I mean? I mean, how long can this go? I mean, nothing is happening of any import. I mean, you don't need more than a couple seconds of her doing this to get the idea, and yet it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Oh my goodness. Yeah, this could have been one movie, I think. Everyone will recognize that at this point. This woman is great. And she hates Edward, which is probably why I like her. At least Edward knows Portuguese, which is nice. Must be tough for a British actor to have to speak Portuguese with an American accent. But, he's not doing a bad job, I guess. At least compared to how he normally speaks with an American accent. If anything, I think the Spanish distracts from it, so... Or not Spanish, excuse me, Portuguese. What's in there? White Demon Love Baby. And there you go, folks. Oh, so disturbing on so many levels. Yes, Thing. I like the timing of this shot. He looks at her just as she looks away. It's good. Now this is, vampires do not want for money in this series. Look at this this plane he's chartered. This is quite the aircraft for two people. But again, I guess that's part of the one of the benefits of being undead is that you live forever and you get to accumulate all that interest. So I guess it makes a certain amount of sense. I wish they could have found a way to make a joke about it, but they never bother, or it got cut out. I don't know. So now we have a nice helicopter shot. So I guess this is the point where everyone should drink, since that's our drinking game. Native American werewolves, by contrast, are very poor compared to the vampires. They live in quite the shack, don't they? I don't know if that's supposed to be a commentary on the plight of Native Americans in our country, though. It'd be nice if Stephenie Meyer put that much thought into it. Of course, I don't know what it says that Bella went with the guy who has all the money. It doesn't really reflect that necessarily all that favorably on her. Makes her look a bit shallow. But then she already looked quite a bit shallow, so... Look at this house. It is absurd. So before, had it been established that the werewolves weren't allowed on the vampire territory? I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter. Nice cross there. I don't know. Off the wall. I don't know if that's supposed to be symbolic of something or not. So from this point onward in the movie, Bella's going to look quite emaciated and sickly because the baby is slowly killing her as it grows inside her. Again, this feels like it should be the opportunity for some rich subtext, but it's really not. It's just a bunch of soapy dramatics. Ooh, that does not look good. It's so absurd. She's dying. So this is, this movie's equivalent of the pro-life, pro-choice debate. And I think in the book there's more hand-wringing about it. I don't know. I have not read. I have to confess that I have not read any of the books, and so I can't really comment on it too much. But so here we learn, that she's going to carry the baby. So she's going to have the baby. But she can't be turned because she's going to carry the baby. She can't be turned into a vampire yet because vampires cannot carry babies to term. They can impregnate you, but they can't deliver babies. I mean, it makes as much sense as anything else, I suppose. And from here until the moment the baby is born, there's not a lot going on in the story, unfortunately. Although we are, I believe we're about to get to one of the best scenes in the movie, which is the dog conference. Oh, if only. So, if you think about it, he's advocating for the abortion of the baby, and it's the same baby that he's later going to plan to kill, and it's the same baby he's going to fall in love with. There's just like there's an insanity to all this if you think about it. That's just quite remarkable. I think Bill Condon's main job in making these movies was to disguise how completely sick and deranged all these weird ideas of Stephenie Meyer truly are. And I have to say, he doesn't do too bad of a job of it, to be honest with you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Taylor Lautner is not a good actor, I'm afraid. I don't I don't think he'll do much after these movies. Teenage emoting. Oh boy. So this next scene that's going to come up is pretty fantastic, I have to say. It has been alluded to throughout, I guess since the second movie, that the werewolves can read each other's minds and have this kind of telepathic connection to each other. But it's always been just something that's been talked about and not really shown. In this movie, we get to see it. And essentially it leads to a scene where a bunch of dogs stand around thinking really hard at each other. And it's... oh, and there goes another pair of clothes ruined. You know, I guess the laundry bills at the... I mean, that must be why they live in such poor conditions. They have to spend so much money on their clothing that there's nothing left for anything else. But this scene coming up is fairly absurd, and I don't know what on earth they were thinking to have it this way. Because if you think about it, it's a scene where all the wolves, the members of the tribe, the pack, come together to discuss what's going on with Bella. And the fact that there's this unknown threat living inside her that won't be able to control its thirst, or, you know, they don't... I assume none of them even knew this was possible, so I don't know how they're all of a sudden experts on what this demon baby is going to be like, but they assume the worst, I guess. But, you know, they have this meeting to talk about it. And there's absolutely no reason why it couldn't just be a bunch of actors, people in human form having this conversation. But instead we have this. And it's pretty awesome, I have to admit. I love this scene. It's completely silly. And Carter Burwell's score is so amped up on steroids. It's just amazing. I guess the one thing they didn't do was, sync up their lips, which would have been really absurd. Instead, it's just you hear their thoughts, and it's quite ridiculous. But this is, I guess, the only thing you get out of having them in wolf form is you see Sam kind of, displaying his alpha male bona fides with his teeth. And then Jacob gets to stand up for himself. I would have loved to have been in the recording booth. So now Jacob's going to be out on his own, I guess. But so little moments like this are what you have to latch on to in these movies. And, that scene was great. Awful and great. They're often the same things in these movies. The worst scenes tend to be the most entertaining. Now he's back in clothes. I have no idea where he got clothes from. One would assume he, ran through the woods as a wolf, as did Seth, and yet they have clothes on. I guess maybe they just keep little stashes of clothes. Or again, it goes back to the fact that this tribe spends an incredible amount of money on clothing. When they're not spending it on muffins. But I guess maybe it's one of those things that you just kind of have to accept. It's like the Hulk, when his purple shorts expand so you don't see big green penis. Again, Boo Boo Stewart kind of showing why he's not much of an actor here. But I don't want to beat up on him too much. Great dialogue from Melissa Rosenberg here. Whatever. I just imagine poor Boo Boo Stewart going to the grocery store for the next 20 years and people, recognizing him as, hey, weren't you that guy in Twilight? And he'll have to say, yeah, that was me. And because I can't imagine they paid him very much to be in these movies. And I don't think he'll be an actor after these movies. So that's what he has to look forward to. I know a lot of people like the idea of being famous, but I've never understood it. Most people who get famous have like this little slice of fame, and then it's over, and then they have to deal with it for a long time. I would imagine it would be quite annoying after a while. There's always an external threat. And it's always based on very poor communication. So, in this movie, why can't they all just have a talk about what to do about the situation? Instead, it has to be resolved through violence. The same thing is true in the fifth movie, where the character played by Maggie Grace believes that the Cullen that Edward and Bella have created turned a child into a vampire, and so she reports them to the Volturi. When of course that's not the case, it's a misunderstanding, and it all could be resolved. Instead, they almost go to war over it, and it's this complete inability to discuss things that could avoid silly conflicts, and it's really just bad drama, bad writing on the part of Stephenie Meyer. But, I think we've established at this point that this is not a well-written series and certainly not well plotted out. So it seems silly to keep harping on it. This story about Leah, I think we learned in the third movie that she had been dumped by Sam. And I think we're about to learn it again, in case you forgot. That, she's basically miserable and mopey because she doesn't have a man in her life. And that seems to be this... Yeah, see here. Oh, I thought she was going to talk about it more. No? I guess not. No, wait. Yeah, here we go. As long as anyone. So that's, more of this creepy, unhealthy subtext that a woman is miserable without a man in her life. It's very retrograde. It's very backwards. Not that there's anything wrong with healthy relationships, but I don't think any of the relationships in these movies qualify as healthy. More padding. More pop songs. I don't know who sings this song though. But it's not very good. You know, people doing web searches in movies. I don't think this has happened since the first movie when Bella was trying to research vampires. But you know, as far as dramatic interest goes, people Googling things ranks pretty low on my list. Nice Apple product placement there. The vampire bringing the werewolf sandwiches kind of makes me laugh. It's such a weird little detail. I like it though. If she had brought the muffin, she would be in. They would love her. I think Carlisle does a lot of medical procedures out of his home, that he has all this equipment. Or did they bring it in especially for Bella because she can't go to the hospital? Maybe they brought it in special for her. You can always hear him struggling. Tell her, Carlisle, tell her. Peter Facinelli, not a good actor. Listen to him mumble. So here's this idea that vampires have venom. Which I am not a huge aficionado of vampire fiction, but I don't think this is a thing in most vampire stories. Stephenie Meyer seems to be under the impression that vampires are like snakes, and they have venom, and you'll see it later when Edward injects Bella with a big ass syringe of his venom. It's very bizarre idea. Oh. Yeah. I have to imagine there are outtakes where he just slips back into his British accent. When he's struggling this much in the takes that they pick, I can't imagine that there aren't those takes. It'd be fun to see them. I don't think we ever will, though. So these special effects to make Bella look very emaciated, and this little bit of body horror here with her seeing what the baby has done to her. It's quite creepy. Unfortunately, it has this terrible song playing underneath it. It's nice that they like football. So they like real football, and we saw earlier the werewolves playing soccer, so they like soccer, whereas the vampires like American football. So Jacob must be just tortured because he doesn't like American football. Jesus. More fetus baby lingo debate there. Very subtle. Bella, the sight of Bella drinking blood is quite funny in this movie because for some reason, they decided that, and maybe it was to get around the MPAA and the ratings board. She drinks it out of a white styrofoam cup with a plastic straw, and it's quite a ridiculous image to see someone drinking a Slurpee out of blood, which is basically what it looks like. So here, this is interesting. They established that the Cullens drink animal blood, but they keep human blood in the fridge apparently. For maybe it's for special occasions. I don't know. Okay, so this is where Edward has his big brainstorm to put it in a styrofoam cup. uh, it's quite silly. But, why do they have human blood? Or do they have that easy access to human blood? Why don't they just drink that all the time? I mean, is it... maybe it's such that it's rare, I guess, and they can only, pull it out on special... It's like, a nice bottle of scotch. You only pull it out on special occasions. Of course, blood here doesn't look anything like real blood, because in movies, blood has to look like this dark, dark red Karo syrup. Whereas, it's funny, if any of you saw Django Unchained, there's a scene in that movie where Leonardo DiCaprio cuts himself and he's really bleeding. It's real blood, pouring like a sieve out of his hand. And they just kept shooting. And it's amazing how different real blood looks from what we typically see on screen. And this doesn't look real at all. But, whatever. This is quite gross, though. Even the idea of it is gross. But more inconsistency, though, because it's established that she wants... The fetus wants... Or the baby, if Rosalie has her way about how to refer to it. I think both are accurate. It's a fetus and a baby, but whatever. But it wants human blood. And yet when the baby is born and it's growing into a child in the next movie, I don't think it ever once wants any blood. And I would have loved to have seen a scene where a 7-year-old drinks a cup of blood. I think that would have been great. I imagine there was a discussion about that and they decided not to do. That would be a bit extreme. Which is, again, there's a lot of missed opportunities in the adaptations. I mean, you're making movies aimed at 16-year-old girls that, are going to make $300 million at the box office each. And you just can't do those kinds of things, which is too bad. Because I would have... If the little actress who plays Renesmee in the next movie, her name is Mackenzie Foy. Oh, here's Sue. Establishing their relationship for the next movie. But if they could have had Mackenzie Foy drinking a cup of blood in the next movie, I would have paid. I mean, that would have been gold. What Bella's doing to her dad is quite cruel. And, Billy Burke really sells it. He's good. How much time does a vampire spend doing his hair every morning, I wonder? So here he comes in and apologizes for being such an asshole. As men do. When they've been assholes. first year is filled with the most blood drinking. That's what they say about marriage, I think. So now Edward gets to read the baby's thoughts, which is... I think the baby in the book has an adult mind. I don't think that quite comes across in the movies. I think that's the way it is in the books. Again, I have not read the books. Somehow I managed to read all 3 of the 50 Shades of Grey books, but could not get past a few pages of Stephenie Meyer's prose in Twilight. It was nauseating. I just couldn't do it. I probably should read them and complete my pedigree, my complete edification on all things Twilight. They think the baby's a boy, which is interesting. I think it's just supposed to be misdirection. Now the question is, if the baby had been a boy, would Jacob still have imprinted on it? That could have been fascinating. Another missed opportunity. A gay werewolf in love with a vampire baby. That could have been great. I would have paid there's no limit to the amount of money I would have paid to see that. Boy, I'm sure glad we got a full shot of him walking up those stairs. I could have never guessed how he got up there unless they'd shown us all of that, you know. These movies are quite padded out. And Jacob just comes and goes as he pleases. He didn't even knock. Quite rude. This idea of vampire families is interesting to me. Obviously, none of them have any blood relation. Pun not intended. But they all behave. I mean, and obviously the family aspect to the Cullens is part of the front that they keep up to, so no one will know they're vampires. But they behave very much as a family, don't they? And Edward calls Carlisle by his first name, but he treats him as his father for all intents and purposes. Even though after 100 years, you're pretty much the same age, are you not? So here they speak as humans, and I think the budget was running low. I think that's why. I don't think there's any other reason. They could have just as easily been wolves. So this is interesting, I think. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm just being very lenient on what I consider interesting. But Jacob kind of makes this deal with the wolves that he'll be the one to kill the baby. But I think he's being... I don't know, it's unclear to me, but I think he's being sincere. And I think it's his intention to kill the baby, right up until the moment that he falls in love with the baby. It's one of the quickest turnarounds from murder to pure love, I think, in movie history. It's quite the achievement. Quite insane. Now, if ever there was some padding going on, this is it. This idea that they had to go out and hunt the night before Bella gives birth to be strong enough to deliver her baby is quite a stretch, if you ask me. And you can really see where what I would love to do is take both movies. I'm sure someone will probably do this with the editing software that exists. You can probably do it quite easily. Is just cut the 4 hours of these two movies down into a 2-hour movie, and it would be much improved. And it would really the crazy would really be much more potent. As it is, it's kind of stretched out to it loses some of its, all the crazy story beats sort of lose their impact the way they're presented here because they're so stretched out. Which is why we get a 3-minute scene of Bella announcing the names of her baby. Now, when I saw this movie with the intended audience, and Bella gave the name for the boy, which was E.J. Edward Jacob. Edward Jacob, Jesus. The entire audience groaned, which was kind of interesting to me, that the entire audience groaned. And I was kind of happy to see that the audience thought that was as lame as I did. Renesmee is quite a name. I guess if you're going to have a half vampire, half mortal demon baby, you can't just name it Sarah or something, You got to have like a funky name. And of course, the nickname that Jacob gives her in the next movie is pure comic gold. And I won't spoil it. Although I'm sure if you're listening to this, you probably have already seen it. Oh, that's never good. So here's the moment where the fetus breaks Bella's spine. And you can kind of imagine a much more graphic version. I wish we had gotten like a CSI zoom in on her body, close up of the baby just doing a ninja kick on her spine. I think that could have been gold. Unfortunately, not. Now this whole sequence, the way this is shot, you have several people. The main figures are Edward and Edward. It's not all that graphic, but it is still pretty effective. But the sequence. My point is, the sequence boils down to Edward and Jacob hovering over Bella, making decisions for her while she's in danger and helpless. And that is Twilight in a nutshell, is it not? Ooh. So there you see in the book it was, I think, far more graphic. The idea that he split her stomach open with his teeth. You can see the blood on his mouth, but you don't really see it. It's too bad. It would have been a great image. And okay. Where's Carlisle? Oh, I guess he's out hunting in the woods. That's very silly. That's, I guess, a reason to get him out of the house, because it would have gone more smoothly with him in the house. So in the second movie, or maybe even later on in this movie, they start CGIing this baby up to make it look creepy and to age it up in a rapid amount of time. But here I just think it's a baby covered in grape jelly, or strawberry jelly, whatever the case may be. And it looks normal. Nothing like a little demon baby. And Bella's in trouble. I think she's about to die, folks. Of course, it had been established in the earlier movie, I think, that Rosalie really wanted a baby. So, she's going to be very affectionate to the kid. So here's him injecting his semen, his his venom into Bella. I never understood that this was the way vampires worked. I didn't know you could extract their venom like a snake and keep it in a syringe. It's a very bizarre idea to me. And he is simultaneously trying to make her into a vampire and give her CPR, which those two goals seem at odds with each other. But don't think too hard. So, Jacob needs a brief moment to mourn Bella before he can decide to kill her child. I mean, you'd think she being dead, or at least he thinking she was dead, he'd be a little bit more reluctant to kill her baby, but apparently not. Oh god, I'm just now remembering that we have to have another werewolf-vampire fight. I mean, you think this would be enough. This is Christopher. Occasionally, Robert Pattinson will do a Christopher Walken impression in his acting. That was one example. That's pretty gross. I mean, this movie is only rated PG-13. I think this is fairly bloody, all things considered. So I guess, to Condon's credit, he made it probably as graphic as he could. Because that's not. And now we're in the credits sequence for Spider-Man 3. Or maybe X-Men. I don't know, but I think the idea here is that the Venom is taking over. But I'm not sure. Doesn't matter. She's somehow, at the end of it, she's going to be a vampire. Yeah, see, Rosalie had wanted a family. So I guess once she wiped the blood off of it, she was good. So are they going to kill Jacob here? Is that what's being implied? Look at all the clothes they're about to ruin. Just, what a waste. Now this moment coming up is really the most insane thing that I think Stephenie Meyer came up with when writing these movies. Or writing the books, I should say. And I laughed when I saw this in the theaters. And I set off a chain reaction of laughter in the movie theater, which I was quite proud of, actually. There's some CGI being done to that baby. It's quite amazing. I think, the one thing they do here is they quickly show you what she'll look like when she's an adult, to kind of de-emphasize the fact that he is swooning over a baby. But it's still ridiculous. Wow. Unbelievable. And really, again, really creepy. Again, this idea that the baby, the main conflict for a woman in the Twilight universe is to find a man and be happy. And in that respect, Renesmee is the best off of any of them because she gets a man within hours of being born. But this idea that, she's basically claimed by him at that age and has no say in it is really icky, and in the final movie it's always there, and he's always lurking nearby her and watching out for her and won't be out of her sight, and it's really disturbing. But the one good thing I think is that I think everyone acknowledges that that's disturbing. I don't think that this whole Jacob falling in love with the baby subplot has too many defenders, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are some people who like it. But I think everyone kind of acknowledges that it's pretty absurd. Never get tired of wolf fights and vampire fights. Just never go for the obvious kill. Now, when you tree a vampire, they're very dangerous. Never tree a vampire. Wolf punch. I just wanted to note that Jackson Rathbone just punched a wolf in the face. And here we get the big reveal. So everyone understands. It's very weird. Helicopter shot. And so now we're really at the end of this one. I don't know why her transformation into a vampire is taking so long. It seems kind of strange. But it just, I guess this kind of gets back into that fairy tale idea of, waking up after a kiss from Prince Charming or whatever. Although, ooh, she looks rough right there, doesn't she? I think they pasted her head on someone else's body, I'm almost certain. Carter Burwell's score for this movie, I think it's good to point out the things that the movie does well. His score is quite nice. Here it really probably was one of the best musical moments of the whole movie. Here she's gonna get fixed by the venom. And so we kind of have this montage of all the scenes from the previous movies, which they do again at the end of the fifth movie. So it really just is kind of, really reinforcing how redundant the fact that they, or how unnecessary it was to split this into two movies. The fact that they had to do basically the same thing twice. Because, this does really feel like it could be the end of the story, does it not? When she turns into a vampire, it's pretty much over. The only things that remain unresolved are... the important thing that remains unresolved is this Jacob and Renesmee story. And then, of course, they invent this conflict with the Volturi to give them something to do in the final movie. But, this in many ways feels like it should... really, her transformation into a vampire should be it, should it not? I don't know what they're expecting here. Do they know she's still got hope? I don't know. I guess so. I like that this is the final image. And what would another movie be without one last bad pop song to close it out? Guillermo Navarro, I believe, photographed a lot of Guillermo del Toro's movies, so he's quite a good cinematographer. This movie certainly looks probably the best. Well, this one and the last one are probably the best looking movies of the entire franchise. Of course, the movie isn't completely over because we still have one final bit of business with everyone's favorite characters, the Volturi, and of course Michael Sheen being the all-star of the franchise as far as I'm concerned. He's so campy, so great, and if there's of all the movies, I'd say the fifth one is probably the one I'd be most likely to watch willingly again and enjoy, because it has Michael Sheen's, by far the most amount of screen time he got is in that movie, and he really kills it, and we get a nice little taste of him here, coming up, I think right about here. Already moved on to another bad pop song. It's amazing how many they can cram in here. Oh yeah. Do these guys just sit on these thrones all day? It's amazing. They must get immortality must be incredibly boring. I love the Eddie Munster's Widow's Peak he has. That's great. They're going to kill her for misspelling. I love it. Anytime I see someone misspell something, I use that line because I love it. Wow. I guess what he wants is Bella herself, because I don't think he knows about the baby yet, because he doesn't learn that until Maggie Grace tells him in the next movie. So I don't know. And now we have one more. I think, is this Bruno Mars? So this is an example of one of the more highbrow pop songs being added, but it's not particularly all that good. Well, folks, that's going to wrap it up. I appreciate everyone listening along with me and watching the movie with me. If you did not enjoy... I can't believe anyone's made it this far into this, but if you did and you enjoyed it, I hope you did. I appreciate you listening. And see you in another life, brother.